Amazing. Welcome everyone to another episode with Coach Inayat Khanji. My name is Jeev Sahu like Yahoo. I run Mindly, where we talk about anxiety, and Coach Khanji, he runs Ample Therapy. We have been having a bunch of these episodes where we talk about various aspects of health and mental health. In fact, there is no health without mental health. And we have structured this episode so that we can go a bit deeper into what exactly we are trying to do here as far as mental health is concerned. And today's session is around the M in Ample, AMPLE, and Mindly has a simple framework, SIMPLE. But today we are talking of the M in Ample. And in this case, Coach Kanji, am I right in saying M stands for exactly that, mental health? Tell me more.
You you are 100% right, Jeev, very much so. So yeah, as you mentioned, M is within the acronym of AMPLE, stands for mental health. And because I work as a life coach, as well as a
Hmm.
therapist, as well as a teacher, I thought it was
Hmm.
befitting because, as you inferred, one cannot really go through life without addressing their mental health, whether it
That's
be in
right.
the workplace, whether it be in their personal relationships, whatever the case may be. Mental health, the conversation one has with themselves, is the
Yeah,
greatest conversation or the most important one, because ultimately it then leads to all other actions and interactions thereafter in terms of affecting performance, as I say, relationships, money, lifestyle, physical health. So it really does have a central key role because ultimately
yeah.
this is what powers the body, right?
And also disempowers as well. If this is not okay, then we lose the power or we are at a suboptimal level as well. And the reason I feel this affects every aspect of our life is because everything being human is a choice or a decision. And if our mental health is not at the stage it should be or it could be, then our decisions are affected. And if our decisions are affected, whether it is money related, relationship related, and health related, and so forth, it starts cascading. In fact, this is a good time to share for our newer viewers that why did we start this? And I, for one, I come from business consulting, engineering, running small business, and so forth, that kind of background. But for me, a bereavement happened and externally everything looked fine, and even the NHS said you are fine, come back when things get worse. But I just needed to take care of this at the prevention stage. And being male, being Asian, being a high functioning business owner, it all just covered up the actual problem. As if, like, when you have hay fever, you take a tablet and you say, I'll get on with life.
Mm,
But if you don't take care of the original situation, things come back worse. And later, when I took talking in this context, it really helped me to open up about the childhood abuse and everything else. And Coach Kanji, you also have a similar reason for stringing together AMPLE. Before we go into the M, could you just highlight your story and Ample?
sure, sure. So as you know, A is for artistic. So one of my first passions in life was the arts. Um, I was a vocalist, if you like, and within that, I then later became an actor, a TV presenter, worked in radio, and so very much the arts was something that I turned to from an interest point of view, from a passion
Hmm.
point of view. But I didn't realize how much it was going to educate me actually about the human process, because within the arts, it's about understanding oneself, mirroring other people, being able to translate and show other people's emotions, being able to
Hmm.
perform at a high level presentationally, being able to articulate yourself. So, in some degree, I was already achieving what I thought I would achieve because I felt I was
Right?
highly functioning. But to fast forward in my personal life, I had started to struggle with mental health issues.
Hmm.
addiction being one of them, which we mentioned off air, um,
Mm-hmm.
and that being symptomatic actually just of what was lying underneath. As you mentioned a moment ago, abuse.
Hmm.
So my childhood catching up with me somewhat. And I'd also qualified to be a teacher at this point, which obviously explains why we have E at the end of ample education.
Right.
But I
Right.
was doing many different things, like physicality wise, like I was heavily into sports, loved martial arts, and at the same time, I was working for large organizations and charities, which would send me in international work, would send me on domestic work. And so I was learning from all kind of areas of life. However, what I recognized within it, I myself was struggling mentally. So
Right.
I could perform in a way, I could have all the knowledge, I could seemingly, act in a way that you would think, as
For
you
the
said before,
external world, yes, for the external world, but not for your internal world. But
and that's it. And that's basically
yeah.
why I found M has to be central to everything. And that's why I qualified as a hypnotherapist thereafter, because I really wanted to focus upon this conversation I'm having within myself and why I speak to myself in such a negative manner at the time.
Um, in some of our workshops, people ask what are some myths about mental health? Because whatever the television shows or the movie shows could be an exaggeration or on either side actually. People might make fun of it, or at the same time, people might be extremely serious about it. But what I found, there is a huge spectrum where it is still there, but people are not looking at it until it is too late, where you come to know, oh, this person was going through that. I didn't know that. He didn't look
Mm,
like that. So, what do you think people miss?
hmm. What do you think people miss? I think many of us, firstly, are not actively listening.
Hmm.
I said this to somebody the other day. If you're having a thought while you're listening to somebody communicate their thought, that's
Hmm.
not active listening. And I know it's really difficult because
Hmm.
often someone throws out an emotion articulated in a thought, and then we have an emotional reaction.
Hmm.
So therefore, our thought starts firing. However, as I say, in terms of really recognizing when somebody else is struggling, in these moments, we almost have to learn this skill set of active listening, where you park your reactions and your responses for a moment so you can
Right?
be really in tune with their feeling. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And
It
so, in
does.
that process, usually, we can expound upon it, like, or expand upon it. Um, Body language itself, the linguistics, the words people use.
Hmm.
There's many things which I've learned as an actor where you can see beyond the mirage, you can see beyond the surface, the veil that they're trying to project. And within that, you start to recognize symptoms and signs of that which lies underneath.
That's a powerful way of putting it. And I kept two words in my mind. One is the park. You park your reactions or responses so that you give more attention to the other person or whatever is happening. And the second one is the veil, because it also relates to having a filter, right? I mean, if you have different colored glasses, you see the world differently, and you're showcasing a different version to the rest of the world. In my experience, if someone is trying a lot to please the environment or people around them, you must have seen the football ad about mental health that has been going viral, where this person was being supportive of someone else in every game, and he was the person going through his own challenges, right? And it shows at the end of it, the other person brings a muffler or something. Um, so over coping is kind of a veil people start to keep. If I, as a child, as an example, I used to overperform because if I am at the top, nobody questions my actions. Uh,
Sometimes when people speak to me, G, like they get worried that everything is going to have a root basis, but unfortunately, it does, right? So, like whether you're talking
yeah.
about success, whether you're talking
Hmm.
about applaud or
Hmm.
applause from an audience, validation, there's so many things which are seen as positive, but
Hmm.
if the driver behind them is negative, then you really have
Correct.
to question. You have to question, right? Why are you doing this, or what is the reason? So yeah, definitely, it's interesting hearing you talk of that because straight away my mind goes back to when I was an actor.
Mm.
And although I don't say that I'm not an actor now, but the difference being is that I don't pursue it in the way that I used to, and I have more interest beyond because I don't really want to define myself as just a performer
Right.
because I found that within that experience, for me, just for me, because it's my mental health journey, I
Hmm.
found that, oh, actually, I do a lot of this for validation. And then the
Hmm.
more I kind of address that issue of neediness,
Hmm.
wanting attention, wanting applause, wanting a pat on the back, wanting to be approved by others. For some reason, my interest started veering. I wasn't as interested in acting. I started getting more interested in mental health, more interested in
Right.
charity work, more interested in education, which I used to be a teacher and I thought I'd left. And I'm now pursuing the arts. So it's really interesting. Like, I've seen many people do pivots when they recognize what their actual motivations are emotionally. Um, but as I say, many at the same time who are just functioning may be
Yeah.
unaware of actually what their essence is.
I'll come to a point, I call it the me theory. But before that, I just observed art is all about expression, and mental health is all about feeling safe.
Mhm.
And if we combine the two, and with the same with P and the L and the E and so forth, am I right in saying that you felt safe in being yourself
Mhm.
as you moved
Uh,
from one expression to something else?
Most definitely, most definitely. I think, look, this is the point in that many of us try to define ourselves through our work.
Hmm.
Many people try to define themselves through external behaviors,
Hmm.
not realizing we're malleable and changeable. I can be an actor, but I can also be a teacher.
Correct.
I can be a martial arts instructor, but I can also be a hypnotherapist. They're just skill sets that I provide to the world in exchange for some money, right? So I can
Right.
live. The end
Hmm.
within simple, right? Because
Hmm.
ultimately that is part of this.
Hmm.
However, in performing, in working, one has to recognize that is not your entirety. You're
That's
not a
part of it.
label. That's just
Yeah.
something you do. That's not who you
Mm.
are. That's not my being, right? And my
Yeah.
essence, my being is an energy that plays and moves in multiple directions. And so,
Yeah.
in the same way that exercise wise, right, somebody might be interested for many years in one sport, they might pivot to
Hmm.
another. But in this process, it's the fact that they enjoy exercise, they enjoy physical health, and they find different means to access it. Mental health is the same thing, right? We all have a continuum of mental health, and
Hmm.
sometimes it suffers more than other, depends on how much attention we give it. And so in that process, for me, more than anything, before I look to the external, the outcomes of what I do in life, I want to know that am I focusing upon that mental health continuum so that when I
Brilliant.
do decide to take on a project or perform within an area of industry, that I'm doing it from a centered place where I don't need
Brilliant.
validation, I don't need approval, I don't need acceptance, I don't need belonging. I already belong within myself. I already accept myself.
You said it so rightly. Without repeating, when
No,
you
no, go
said
for it, go for it. I talk too long.
you don't need belonging, or you do need, but you have given it to yourself first, if I may rephrase it that way. You don't need additional belonging, additional validation. because the first validation, which many people forget, is that you have to do it for yourself. And if you have done it for yourself, if additional validation is coming from rest of the world, amazing and cheer, that's great. But if it is missing, you don't feel lost or unsafe.
Yeah.
So that's how I just put it. And if I translate it to the workplace, whether it is, and we focus on men and founders as well, because they are the ones who kind of say, I'm all right, and move on. I'll just pull up my socks and I'll be
Mm,
fine. We tend to forget our own self.
mm,
And sometimes out of shame, but sometimes out of self-independence. And sometimes because you are trying to prove something either to a parent or to the society, but the one person you got to prove to is you to
mm.
start with, and we forget that if I have
100%.
proven it to myself,
100%.
and
100%.
yeah, that
Well, I think,
safety is the basis for mental health, I would say.
yeah, well, I think that, it's so important because, many people will operate for, and the body's so resilient, so they'll operate for years
Mm-hmm.
under the presumption
Mm-hmm.
that they're okay, or they've made this choice from a centered place. But
Mm-hmm.
actually, as I've spoken many a time before, 90% of your mind is subconscious, 10% is critical analysis and rationalizing and everything other, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when these emotions start to surface, we'll rationalize against them sometimes, even because
So
we're unfamiliar with them, right? And we'll
I
just
was
power
waiting
through.
for that word. You said that word. I was about to say that word, but you said it. Familiarity
Well,
is confused with safety, unfortunately.
beautifully put, right? It's familiarity is definitely confused with safety, right? And you can see that in people who have been abused, because at least I recognize that I would attract situations which reflected those first experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not in a direct sense, but emotionally, they
Feeling
gave me
wise.
some parallels of feeling, right? And I would
Mm-hmm.
ask
Mm-hmm.
myself, why am I finding myself in this circumstance again? Because to some degree, I'm people pleasing all the time for
Mm-hmm.
approval and validation. Bringing it back to your original point. And when I learned hypnotherapy, and specifically the brand of hypnotherapy that I use, rapid transformational therapy, it was
Mm-hmm.
really interesting to hear when we were talking about children and roles children play, that
Mm-hmm.
there'll be a child who is the perfectionist, one
Mm-hmm.
who never wants to do anything wrong from a performative sense, from a behavioral sense, from an emotional sense of expression.
Right.
So they please everyone around them so they never get criticized. Then you have a child who cares for everyone else,
Mm-hmm.
because there are lots of people who seemingly are unwell or unable to look after themselves, whether that be emotionally, mentally, or physically. Often that child who then becomes an adult takes it upon themselves to try and heal others before
Yeah.
healing themselves, right? To a certain degree, I think, many of us who start this work might start from that standpoint and then
Yeah.
realize through the process of studying, oh, okay, maybe that's why I was even gravitating towards this, because this is really a healing process for me. I thought
For
I'd help
yourself. Yeah.
others,
For
but
myself.
really it's because you've experienced some pain or some damage in your childhood that has made you
Yeah.
now recognize pain within others. And so you want to help change that. But really and truly, it's first about helping oneself in order to help others. So we could go on, but the point is, I think, as you showed or illustrated, that with mental health, especially in the workplace, especially with men, people wear a lot of
Yeah.
masks, and we really have to break that down in order to understand what is at the core of this individual.
So that core, at the end of the day, comes to a sense of safety or fear, and they are kind of complementary. Or absence of fear is safety, or absence of safety is some fearful place. And children at that age, because they have not, and I'm speaking from my own experience as well as speaking from other people that I have worked with, At that stage, they felt safe by pleasing everybody. They felt safe by being the overperformer. They felt safe by caring for someone else if there was a caring situation at home, and they felt that, you know what, I get my identity by taking care of this person, or they felt safe by healing someone else as well. But if they have forgotten themselves, they start losing their own self, then it starts going towards burnout. And one of
Mm,
the key things, stress is defined as like when things don't match between what you want to do and what is happening, you start getting stressed,
mm,
right? It's a good thing, it's a friendly thing, it's an indicator. But no, but we don't realize when it has become physical, when it has become anxiety, when it is becoming burnout. And at a workplace, especially in a performance-driven workplace where I have to show up with a lion face because I have these many people, this, or I have to raise a couple of million for my company. I can't go and tell them that I'm feeling anxious because of a bereavement, right?
mm,
And people put that mask on, which temporarily is a good thing, temporarily.
mm.
But if it has not been taken care by your own self, when you don't put self-love back, self-care back, um, then it starts eating us inside, and then it goes towards mental health.
Yeah, and I
And
think
when we're
even beyond that,
Mhm.
sorry, Jeeve, because I
Yeah.
think you touched upon it, the physical.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
I spent time recently with a friend who was a doctor,
Hmm.
and he'd just come back from a work conference with a very famous doctor headlining as a speaker called Dr. Gabor Mate.
Hmm.
Mate spelled
Hmm.
Mate.
Hmm.
And this gentleman, an 80-year-old man of many years of medical practice, is explaining to all these GPs, surgeons, people in the medical field how trauma creates physical health problems.
True.
And he was quizzing people literally, like somebody would
Hmm.
say, I had breast cancer, but I had a great childhood.
Hmm.
And his line of question was nothing to do with physicality.
Hmm.
It's like, did you used to tell your mum about things when you had problems at school, for instance? And he was just
Hmm.
doing certain questions, to find out what the home environment was like, because she was
Right.
espousing that she had the best childhood. And
Mm.
what he found out in a moment was that she'd been bullied for 3 years in school, but she never told anyone about it.
Still inside. Yeah.
So multiple years later, and that's why I mentioned earlier, the body is resilient, and that's why many people, when you're speaking to them, because it's not manifesting yet, they're like, "Ah."
It seems all right. Yeah.
But then
But
later,
it's not.
when they're
Yeah.
struggling, when they have skin issues, when they have heart problems, when they have blood pressure, when they have, stomach problems, because we know stomach is the seat of emotion, whatever the case may be physiologically, often it is rooted in one's mental health.
We call it the three shocks in Mindly.
Go on.
One is one is the health shock. So all of a sudden somebody had a cardiac arrest or fainted or a stroke or something, but this has been building up probably since the last 10, 15 years because of these kind of situations. So one is the health shock. The second one is the wealth shock as well, or money shock. You start a company, lose everything, become a millionaire, and then lose everything. Or I mean, there are many cases where people. I was listening to a very successful actor's biography, and one person from the audience says, "Oh, but do you know he lost it all over one weekend?" and so forth. So that there is that money shock that happens, and the third, so health shock, wealth shock, and relationship shock. All of a sudden, and I've seen this firsthand with a colleague. Uh, Christmas is the highest number of divorces in anywhere in the world, if you see.
Uh,
And vacations are the highest number of divorces as well because people go on vacation, spend time. In fact, when they're working, they're spending less time with each other, but when they go on vacations, they come back with completely different opinions. And what happens with shock? This shock is a way of life and your body telling you you got to change your decisions. You got to
mm,
change and you start taking care of your own mental health.
mm,
Um, And of course, sometimes it is secondary, meaning the cardiac arrest might not be for me, but for someone I know. But it makes you think that, oh, okay, uh, did I put those 150 hours that week, stopping not to even have a proper meal? Um, and then did it add up to this? Or was it okay for me to make a list of things that I prefer as a sense of self-care at work, self-care for my company, or self-care for like my family? But I took care of myself first, not out of selfishness, because of self-love. And
Mm.
if I can take care of myself, I can be a better person at work. I can be a better person for my family, and I can be a better person for the society as well, instead of getting any of these shocks, health or
Hmm.
wealth, and so forth.
100%. And as you mentioned earlier, talking about bereavement, I came, as you know, this week, I had family bereavement myself. And
Mm,
so I came off the weekend, and Monday was the funeral. Just being quite reflective about this, these events in life, loss and physical
mm,
health. And in this case, it was somebody who developed cancer in their last year of life.
mm,
Now, again, everyone is different, and everyone has a different emotional bank. Everyone has different set of experiences. So some people might find that they resiliently go through life in some way, just managing to get many years out of themselves, thinking there's going to be no effect to them. And
mm-hmm,
then all of a sudden, they develop these major illnesses in the final years. Another one is dementia. I've seen
mm,
it with many, many resilient CEOs, builders, people of, extreme independence. And then all of a sudden, in their 70s and 80s, they're experiencing dementia when they give up their control, often, when
yeah,
they give up
yeah,
and retire. And now they have nothing that creates their identity other than themselves, nothing that they do. Right.
yeah,
So this is why I
yeah,
mentioned this stuff earlier, because I've really seen it. And then I've seen everything in between, people who are really rushing in life to make the next million and extremely successful and in demand and in need all the time. But you can see over a course of 5, 10 years, they went from a really slim, healthy individual who had lots of time for themselves in terms of their work life balance to
mm-hmm,
they make loads of money and they're really successful, but every other part of them has deteriorated. But because it
yeah.
hasn't yet put them in a hospital bed, they still just keep going,
They're still on it until they
just
get a
keep
shock,
ignoring. Yeah, and
a
that's like
wake-up
like say
call.
until they get the shock, right?
Yeah,
So it's
a
really
wake, a
interesting how
wake-up
these two
call,
things play
right?
together. A
A
wake up
wake-up
call, if
call.
you like, but not everyone is granted it, and that's why I mentioned these other individuals. Because if you're in a situation where you're now told,
Mm-hmm,
I have another family member who, God forbid anything happens, but he's in a place of almost stage 4 cancer too. But he's only 56 years old and he's been a builder all his life.
mm,
Very successful, worked really hard though. And unfortunately, he martyred himself in the process. So,
yeah,
it can happen to people at any stage and age. I
that's
could keep
true.
giving examples, like people even younger. A friend of mine that died in his mid 40s. None of us thought he was going to have any
Yeah,
physical illnesses. We joked like only yesterday because we visited his grave that we thought he would die on a motorbike accident because he was like an adrenaline junkie. He's going to go out
yeah,
with a bang. He died of dialysis issues. He got
mm,
diabetes and then dialysis, and it was in lockdown. So it's health is so important. My parents always used to say to me, health is wealth. And so we cannot escape mental health first because that's sending the messaging to the
yeah,
physical aspect. We are spiritual beings in a material casing. We're non-material, we're energy, then
yeah,
placed upon with matter, right? So
exactly.
if people believe in the afterlife or anything other, maybe they can resonate with it a little more. But either way, even if you're just coming from a scientific point of view, many people are now understanding how this energy interacts with the physicality.
How can people change these habits every day in small ways, whether at work or whether in their personal life? any suggestions that you would like to
Ooh,
share
yeah.
to be more
You know why
mindful?
I'm getting excited and I'm cutting you off because the answer's already there. Talk. This is seemingly such a simple thing, but it
Mm-hmm.
is so empowering. You know,
Mm-hmm.
as I mentioned about our personal experience of a funeral this weekend, you can imagine it being a family-based funeral. People are
Mm-hmm.
trying to take the lead and kind of give lots of help to the family who've experienced the loss. But at the same time, in taking the lead, people get stressed because now control factors are involved, egos involved, um,
Mm-hmm.
judgment is involved. How is this going to go? What will people think? All sorts of different emotions are flying around, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting now that the whole weekend's finished, everything's happened, the family are contented, they're at peace, they experienced what they wanted to experience
Mm-hmm.
within the circumstance of their father passing. Those people who are organizing, those family members who are organizing, have still got loads of residual emotion. And I
Mm-hmm.
noticed nobody was talking to them. And now they're wondering, now they've gone to another emotion there. Did they appreciate it? Did they not appreciate it? They haven't expressed where they
Mm.
appreciated it. And there's all sorts of these thoughts firing around. And then it
Yeah.
started manifesting into little conversations between them where they would pass their negativity to each other. Like they would then be saying, well, what do you think? Do you think they appreciate? Maybe they didn't appreciate, like, and all these
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of things,
Yeah.
right?
And then
And
it scales. Yeah.
and all it is that they need a therapeutic conversation, one where
True.
you can actually express the emotion, not the critical rationalizations of doing, but rather, how are you feeling? Are you not feeling appreciated? Are you not feeling like somebody has communicated how much they needed you or desired you or felt supported by you, like all these things,
True.
rather than looking at, well, I sent this person this message and they haven't responded, and like going into the detail of things, every minutia act of different individuals.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's just clouding the mind, when really and truly all that's occurring is there's a lack of understanding between two people, but
Yeah.
you'll
And lack
spiral
of
and spread that
expression, right?
everywhere.
Because
Say that
see,
again, sorry.
talking expression, talking is at the end of it an expression, right?
Yeah.
And definitely talking helps. And workplace wise, family wise, definitely talking helps. But if there is an expression of appreciation, that itself starts changing things. And the other thing I took from you is when you mentioned understanding environment, effectively a non-judging environment, because all nearly everybody is constantly being worried, will I be judged for this or that in one way or the other? So when we go and do this in small companies with 20 people or 30 people, we create a small group and they are their own support group, and they don't need to talk about their feelings. They could banter about coffee, golf, the weather, or the lack of sunshine. Or today we are having wonderful sunshine. And the key thing is, I'm not being judged while expressing among these five people. And
Hmm.
as you start doing it, you start moving from that neutral stage to appreciation. These guys did so much for this funeral, uh, and could we do something in return? Or could we do something to show our appreciation? Of course, a bunch of it could be talking, but a bunch of it could be, I mean, in my case, I have I've cooked for someone
Hmm.
as a way of thanking them. And I told them, I understand you might get bored of me talking, but here's my food. So that kind of
Wow.
expression is definitely helpful in such places, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think I'll take it beyond that. Like, as I say, sometimes you are second guessing other people. So, like you say, it might be that the emotion is that I wanted appreciation. Well, not even
Hmm.
necessarily. It's not necessarily that they want plaudits, but it's about connection, isn't it? It's like, I love you, and therefore I did a lot for you. But it's
Right.
having expectation attached to that, that now I'm going to
Mm.
get a certain response of validation. And this is what I mean about, in expressing to somebody else, somebody you're close with, who you feel safe with, who won't judge you, it often enables you to work through those emotions, so that when you meet that person who you felt didn't appreciate you, which was a complete presumption because you haven't been able to communicate with them directly because you're afraid
Right.
to be rejected or not feel connected,
Mm-hmm.
you've actually managed to move through those emotions of fear, as you spoke about earlier, and now get to a place a bit more with some clarity where you can actively listen now and find out what was happening for that person. And maybe within that, you will then realize that a lot of the thoughts that one had of a negative nature, of feeling unappreciated, were actually unwarranted, because now there's an open means of communicating whereby people are speaking to each other's hearts rather than from each other's heads. That makes sense?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, definitely. So what I try to do, and people get surprised. I said anywhere you use the word negative, try to use unhelpful, because there is nothing called negative because they're trying to help us.
That's true. That's true. That's true. I like that. I like that. We are word people, so I'm going to try and implement that one. Thank you. No, because it's interesting because
Yeah,
we always talk about positive, negative, positive, but they're just all emotions, right? I
yeah.
suppose the only positive and negative is how you react. So yeah. So let's
And
say
it's us.
unhelpful.
It's us here, right? How we react, how I react, how one on self reacts. So tell me a bit about why still people are hesitating to talk about this, and especially even men, but I'm talking about society in general. I was in a company where they used to sing about well-being, but people used to still hesitate about talking about like, should I talk about this bereavement, or should I talk about not feeling well, or will I be considered the complainer in the company or in the family, and so forth. What is your
Hmm.
observation, and what can people do about it?
So it's twofold. So my observation is you're very right that men, first and foremost,
Hmm.
um, as I mentioned earlier, I don't like labels per se, and so therefore I don't want to stereotype. However, from my experience, I
Hmm.
find that those who are especially hyper masculine,
Hmm.
as we have both feminine and masculine energy within us, but those who maybe have moved towards the stereotypical archetypes of what it is to be masculine,
Hmm.
find it really difficult to address and express emotion. Often people joke about relationships between husbands and wives and girlfriends and boyfriends, but essentially, I think it's more a societal thing rather than a nature nurture, or a nature argument. Sorry, it's more of a nurture
Okay.
thing whereby in society, men have been taught, as you mentioned earlier, just pull your socks up. Um, Crying is a weakness. Um, Open displays of emotion sometimes are seen as awkward and as a weakness, especially within England,
Hmm.
Britain. Where it's even more. I was speaking to a friend, a Colombian friend, and she was saying that in the Latin culture, we're a lot more expressive with our
Of
emotion
course.
words. Whereas
Yeah.
her husband is a British-born person, though he's of a different ethnicity to the
Hmm.
English, but he's very
Hmm.
British. And I recognize, as someone who's born here, that generally English people find emotions quite awkward to deal with
Yeah.
because we want to just function again, right? So I think it's really, really important, just generally,
How do we
to
change
acknowledge the
that?
fact. Yeah.
Because I mean, even when I mean, people say, "You all right?" Yes, all right, and move on, right? In fact, there is a comedy show that goes where in other cultures people say, "How are you?" and somebody might get a four-line answer, but here they have kept the expectation itself at the very bottom. So it's like,
Right
yeah,
at the bottom.
yeah, okay, you okay? Move on, and so forth. So, what could
And
people
it's
do to change?
well, it's a difficult one because you might find that people within like the working environment, let's say, if someone asks you how are you today, as you mentioned earlier, sometimes it's not appropriate to completely bear everything that's within oneself, right?
Hmm.
Sometimes we need somewhat of a filter because we have to read the room.
Mm-hmm.
However, I would argue that when in individual, well, one-to-one scenarios, when you are in a position where there is some more fluidity, somebody is actually asking out of real concern,
Mm-hmm.
try and open up a little bit, see what happens. Because often you'll find you'll have further connection and you'll actually have more in common than you might think. Because in answer to your question about is it a weakness, why are men, so avoidant of it? It's because essentially, if it was your manager, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
somebody who's in a position of responsibility, and I think all people now in the workplace, can identify with this, but as men, um, traditionally, providers, protectors, everything other, it's very difficult to then say, as a provider and a protector for your staff, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
I'm struggling with something,
Yeah.
because again, it's ego and status, like one is in a position of authority. I can't be seen as weak. I can't be seen as incompetent. I can't be seen as needing help. They need my help. And
So
very
there
much
is a
just
way out.
reward.
There is a way
Yes,
out here, and
please.
that way out is to create these non-judgmental support groups. You could be having just four other people who regularly meet for a coffee or whatever, and the more we start expressing, remember you mentioned about talking, the
Yeah.
more we encourage that, these people become their own level of support groups, and this has been first proven among women. I mean, women lead the way. They have shown us a bunch of really correct things to do, and there it was like they opened up in their environment a bit more. And there are certain women, for example, corporate women who connect together at a different level. Same thing. It also happens with dog lovers, coffee lovers, golf lovers, or whatever, right? Gender
Mm-hmm.
irrespective, but also works
Mm-hmm.
with men as well. And there, instead of you worrying about, I have to show this lion face because I'm the provider, you are kind of opening up with someone who has also gone through the same kind of situation. An example we have seen is a number of startups who have failed. People who are
Mm-hmm.
doing their second startup, they meet weekly, they meet online, and they share things that someone else can actually skip doing the same mistake. And they said, okay, I did a big mistake, but this is my journey, and people actually empathize with that kind of thing, and that familiarity is now helping in a positive way compared to
Yeah, and I
being
think
ashamed.
I think the final thing I'll say is like it comes back to what you really succinctly created in terms of a punctuation mark for how you build resilience.
Hmm.
Because I've quoted you many times on this, that safety first, then sharing and connection, that then enables you to build resilience. So
Yeah,
the idea that it's a weakness actually is really misleading, because if
true.
I have somebody who's super successful who then says to me, look, the way I became resilient, the way I
Hmm.
became super successful was first recognizing that I'm not alone, that I can take risks, I can fail. Many people have done it before me.
Hmm.
I can share with others around me, share the struggles I'm having, and that might lighten my load. And
Yeah,
then I'll know that I'm again not alone. And then therefore I will have more resilience in the process from an innate place, from a place of it coming from within rather than it being something I have to will myself rationally to achieve. Right. And so again, there's no weakness in it. If anything, it's a strength to share. And I
yeah,
know some
definitely it's a
people find
strength.
that really pansy and airy fairy and like, fluffy, like, but yeah, apologies if I use words which aren't even appropriate. But yeah, the point being is because because
No,
I've been told this many a time that, like,
yeah,
yeah, it's all right for you and I because you work in these areas, but if you come to my environment, my workplace, and
Hmm.
it's all ego based because in personal circumstance, these people are open up to me all the time. But
Right.
it's like you put on a costume, or as we said before, a mask when you walk into the workplace. When in actual fact, it's no different than in any other environment in life. You're just parking your mental and physical health and emotional health until you walk out the office.
True. In our workshops, when we do these support groups, initially, and I can actually quote one from a job center because there the situation was really worse. Everybody was looking at their shoes, they were not looking at each other, and they said it's not going to help, and they were feeling that shame and so forth. But as they started sharing today in many of these work groups, they say, "This is my safety net. This is where I can ping in the middle of the night, and this is where I go back to just share something." And you mentioned about sharing, it diminishes the problem. It also shows that we need not catastrophize, because when we are by ourselves and when we think that the entire world's load is on us as the company owner or family head or whichever way you are looking at it, or even as a parent, it shows that I'm not alone. This person also went through that 4 years
Mm,
ago.
yeah.
This person is about to go through that later if he doesn't listen to this group, because this group could actually give them that, yeah, I mean, we were there 2 years ago, and looks like you could take a left turn instead of a right turn, and just do something, and we are there for each other. And more importantly, the sense of shame, the sense of
Mm,
hesitation or shyness or the stigma is gone.
hmm. And this is what's key. I think that, we need to start changing the way that people view this form of expression and communication, you know,
Yeah.
to express emotions that some might find heavy isn't necessarily a negative thing because you're lightening their load. And if we are talking about
Right.
outcome and business, as we've said before, if your ideal goal is a better performance from your staff, from your business, then surely lightening the load of your staff members through these
Mm-hmm.
processes and practices will enable them to be much more efficient in their performance.
100%. Um, just for our viewers, we do
Mm.
special question and answer sessions because if you look at the time, time has been flying. And
Always does with us. Always does with us, G.
and we have been getting some questions on the side as well. Some of them I could I just put it in the conversation so that people get the answer, and we try not to share who asked the question so that people can ask it in an anonymous way, in a safe manner. But what we also do is we keep a repository of all these questions. Last week we did one more, and next week is coming one more. So please keep sending your questions, and we'll answer them all in one go in alternate episodes. And again, this is just the beginning. We have P, L, and E of ample, and we want to talk about the simple framework as well. But please feel free to send any questions. Um, and Sincere thanks for taking the time to spend nearly an hour. It's 48 minutes looking at the clock with this. But as we talk more, as we share more, this becomes a diminishing problem, a shared problem. And one day we won't need to talk about mental health, not because of shame, more because it's normal life and we take care of each other.
I think that is an aspiration we can all, work towards. And I hope that the work that we're doing here is a catalyst for it. So, no, thank you, Jeeve. It's always a pleasure, sir. And I'll be back for the next one.
Thank you so much, Coach Kanchi. Thank you.